so appreciate the council showing up tonight. We're going to just jump in. Tonight is a special night to focus in on the fiber projects here for the city. We've had a lot of presentations. We've had a survey go out, and so I'd like to turn some time over to Aaron, maybe to go through a little bit, how we got here, a little bit about the survey, and then what do we need to do going forward.
Thank you, Mayor. And yes, this has been, in some ways, if you want to look at a years-long project that the city is engaged in, but very focused in the past few months. And so I'm hoping that this work session will provide some clarity to you so that you can give us some direction of what steps do you want staff, if any, to take moving forward in terms of a fiber project. So tonight we're going to talk about high-level overview, remind you what does having fiber mean or doing a fiber-wide project for the community. And then I'm going to give you a summary of the presentations that we've seen over the past little while from the different companies. And then we'll talk about, as the Mayor mentioned, we did a community survey over the past 3 weeks. So I'll share results with that. And then I'm going to give you some guided questions to try and give us some direction moving forward. As we review these models, I'm not going to ask you tonight to choose a provider. What I'm going to ask you to do is answer some questions for me so we understand what, if anything, you're interested in doing for a fiber project. And from there, what we would actually do is do some kind of a request for information or request for proposal where all companies send us and say, okay, within these parameters, what are you willing to do with us? So think about it from that perspective, if you will. Okay, so why do we care about fiber? In terms of internet possibilities, right now, from a technology standpoint, it's the fastest symmetrical connection, meaning symmetrical, your uploads and your downloads, right? Whereas on a different type of a system like a coax, you have fast one way, but not fast both ways. One thing as I talk to residents about this that I think is important to understand is that other technologies that you hear as an alternative to fiber actually rely on fiber as part of their backbone. So when we talk about cell towers that are now offering fiber to the home or 5G, we've had this conversation, are we worried that 5G is just going to replace fiber? It can't, because it needs fiber to run itself. Like we said, while technology seems to change all of the time, fiber really does seem to be one of those, from everything we're understanding at this point in time, that it is a technology here to stay. What would be the benefits of doing a full citywide fiber project, meaning every home in Highland has the opportunity to connect to fiber? From a residential standpoint, again, it's that every home has the option. It's not a situation where companies are just going where they would like to for, from a profitability standpoint, because that will leave out certain sectors of our of our city. In addition, it could potentially give more options for our schools to have internet bandwidth as needed. From a city perspective, we have run into issues in the past, especially at our parks or some of our remote, wells and things of that nature, where we have issues or aren't able to deploy some of the technology we would like as easily. Things like cameras, security cameras for our parks. Water meters, our SCADA system, which monitors well levels and different things and alerts us if there's a problem. Smart sprinkler controls, and then just other general city infrastructure there. So fiber could provide a lot of benefits, but of course there's pros and cons to every model. So like I said, I'm going to give you a high-level overview of the presentations that we've heard, but I will say each company we've talked to, I'm going to give you what they told us their proposal was, but each of them have said, we're willing to work with you though if you want to do something different. So again, we're not choosing a provider or a company. We're wanting to know what, if anything, do you want the city to focus on in our fiber project, rather than a specific company. I think I just went through this slide, basically. Okay, yes, and then we're going to we would move forward to some kind of a request for proposal type process from here. Okay, so Comcast. not a fiber provider, but they have come and talked to us, so I wanted to remind you where we're at with them. Right now, they have about 93% coverage in the city. They're planning to get up to nearly 98% this year. And we did see, sneak preview in our survey results, that a lot of our city is on Comcast. They are a coaxial cable. While they have portions of their network as fiber, my understanding is the lines running to the homes directly are not fiber, nor do they really have the capability of, at least the intention of all of those lines converting to fiber at this point in time. Right now, they do not, Comcast is totally running free market. They have not asked us for any money, any kind of a commitment that way. Strata. Strata could not be here tonight, a representative, and so the representatives, I told them they're more than welcome to be here, but you're welcome to ask them questions if you would like to, but this was really intended more to be a conversation for council, so they do not have planned presentations. So in the Strata model that they presented, the city would bond for the total construction of the network, and we would own the network. Strata would construct the network, operate the network, and maintain the network for us. So we would contract with them to run our network. Strata is an open access, meaning that they would lease out their fiber to different internet service providers, ISPs, so that residents would have a choice of which, they wouldn't actually get their internet from Strata, it would be one of the ISPs who are on Strata's network, who would be on our network, leasing space there. In this model, some of the subscriber fees would be paid back to the city. The intention for those would be first to cover the bond payment that we would need to make because we had bonded for the total construction of the project. And then secondly, after the bond was paid off, it would be a long-term revenue source for the city, is the intention. Of course, the city would need to make up any difference. So if we didn't get the take rates that we were anticipating getting, we would need to use other city funds to make up any difference there. Strata's estimate at this point is 3 years to do a build out throughout the entire city. And while they said they're willing to do other methods, they do prefer the micro trenching method for installation.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
What take rate would be necessary in order to kind of pay for the bond payment?
You know, I did not get Strata, at least to my recollection, did not give us a guesstimate. I'll say one of our other providers gave us an estimate of 44% would need to be the take rate to make the bond payment. Nobody has done a low-level design for our city, meaning it's a guesstimate as to how much it's going to cost. Somewhere between 15 and 20 million is kind of the range that we keep getting told. And so they won't really fully know that until like a more definite design is done of our city.
Are you speaking specifically as Strata now, or are you talking about everyone kind of as a...
Everyone, meaning we've gotten different cost estimates from the different entities who've given us proposals, and they range between about $15 and $20 million.
I thought there was one of the entities where it was much lower, and they would pay the difference, and it was kind of a different model, which seemed...
Yep, so that's Utah Broadband, and so the total cost is still the $15 to $20 million, but the cost that they were asking us to do was much less because it is a very different model. So we'll get to them.
We'll get there in a second.
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Any questions about Strata before we move on? Other questions, I should say. Okay, Utah Broadband. So this is the one you were referring to, Councilmember Ball. So in the Utah Broadband proposal, they would construct, own, and maintain the network. So it is their network. In addition, one difference is that they're the sole source internet provider, meaning they would be the ISP that residents could contract with to get fiber internet to their home. They did request a moratorium for new franchise agreements with other entities. In researching that, Rob is telling us we can't do that, but we could enter into a partnership with them, essentially where they become a public-private partnership where we're working together with them to do this, but we could not prohibit any other fiber companies from doing franchise agreements in our city. They would offer internet to our city facilities for $1. Very generous there. And then their preferred method is directional drilling and overhead when needed, rather than the micro-trenching method.
I have a question.
Please.
Directional drilling would refer to horizontal drilling like they do in fracking?
Andy?
Right, horizontal, so it's horizontal drilling as opposed to vertical drilling. And so, similarly like they do in the oil industry. So, it's the same technology? Essentially.
Horizontal drilling is... Coming to the microphone, please. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm not trying to extend this, but I know what directional drilling means. You're not limited to just vertical. You can go angularly.
So typically we're horizontal between 2 and 3 feet below the surface. Fracking is much deeper.
Of course, but it's
Yeah.
the same technology,
So,
which is.
so Tim, I think what you're asking, micro-trenching traditionally is on the side of the road, and they're going and making a small cut in the road, going down at, say, 12 inches and putting a line or conduit, where directional drilling is they're not disturbing the road, they're going to kind of drill from one side of the road to the other. Am I kind of seeing that
So it
correct?
just,
Correct, yeah.
it goes down and then it goes horizontal, and then it's like a, okay.
Yeah, more not,
And angular and then horizontal, okay.
yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
All right, thank you.
So an inverted rainbow, so.
There you go, yeah. Okay.
And if we decide to move forward with a project, Andy would certainly be heavily involved, which is why he's here tonight, to discuss these different methods and the pros and cons to each, and what would be the method we would want to use moving forward.
And then do we have any idea what they're asking for, just in terms from us? You said it's going to be 2 million.
Yes, so wait till, thank you for transitioning me to the second slide for Utah Broadband.
I'm here to help.
Their estimate at this point is $18 million to build out the entire city. And so they're offering, like you indicated, a very different model where they are offering a cost sharing with the city, where the city selects how much we are willing to cost share. So Utah Broadband would pick up between 75 and 85%. We would pick up between 15 and 25%, which for us, if at $18 million, would mean 2.7 to 4.5 million. Again, and then the subscriber fee that would get paid back to us would increase the more of the cost sharing that we would take on this proposal. A portion on this model, a portion of the subscriber fees come back to the city. Again, the same methodology where bond payment, and it would be a long-term revenue source for us. Of course, we would have to pay any difference there. And their current estimate is a 2-year build-out for our city.
Do you have an estimate on the take rate on this? Would it be similar?
I mean, so
Because it's a much lesser amount.
Well, no, but we're
Well-
not getting the full percentage. I mean, when you're saying lesser, we're not getting 100% of the revenue. So the revenue coming in, we're only, so if it's, let's assume it's 18 million, we're covering the 25% of that 18 million, so we're getting 25% of the revenue.
No, right, but I just want to know what the take rate would need to be. It wouldn't be logical that it would be the same take rate as the other model.
Well, it should be, because you're only getting back the revenue of 25%. So your take rate would probably still be between that 40 and 50%.
Okay, great.
That's at least what our understanding is, as we've heard the
But
presentation.
eventually, we'll be able to see some really hard numbers.
we would really, hopefully, you can give me some direction tonight so that I can give these companies direction as to what is the council interested in doing, and then they can give me more concrete proposals. But
For example, on the 75 or 85%, if we knew like the future value of that annuity, then we would be able to make a decision based upon that number, and what's in the best long-term interest of the city, as opposed to, oh, that looks really great in the short term.
Right,
And we
because
can
it's a
think about-
much smaller debt amount,
Yeah,
certainly.
So, I mean, like a future value number and that type of thing, so.
Yep, absolutely. Oh, excuse me. Anything else on Utah Broadband before we move on to our next provider? Okay. Utopia/UIA. I'm going to say Utopia. They're technically two different entities, though sister entities. I'm just going to say Utopia. It would actually be UIA is who we would be working with. But we're just going to call it Utopia because everybody knows what I'm talking about for that. Utopia is an interlocal entity, so they are different from these other entities in that they are made up of governments, and so they are not a private entity, they are interlocal. Utopia's typical model is that they bond for the cost of the construction on behalf of Highland City. So the bond is not on our books, it would be on Utopia's books. Utopia constructs, owns, and maintains the network, so it is their network. And they are an open access, meaning they're leasing out the network to other ISPs so residents can have a choice in which provider they use. Again, the take rate goes towards the bond payments, and the city just, again, has to pledge a revenue source to make up any difference. Utopia's told us this has not happened with other cities. They've been able to get the necessary take rates. And if there were, we probably have options for extending the bond or changing some methodology there so that it would not impact the city's financials.
Aaron, since we have a representative here from Utopia, can I ask a question?
Please.
Roger, can I ask you a question? When it talks the city needs to pledge a revenue source, is Utopia also requesting that the city pledge sales tax or some type of source of revenue that's the city's, or is it just open?
So that is what the form of the pledge is. You have to identify some sort of revenue source. The most common one UIA has done is actually franchise revenue.
Okay.
So gas and cable and things like that where you get revenue from those. If that's not enough, we've done sales tax. Some of them we've done a blend of both. But the most popular recent has been sales tax.
Okay.
Just because those have been healthy. Like in the last few years, most cities have seen a lot of growth there.
There was just a question, as we were going through the presentation, that was just one question. I'd heard that we need to pledge some source of revenue on that, so I just wanted to make sure I understood.
No expectation you spend any of that, but you have to point to something.
You have to pledge because you're going to get in a bond. Okay. Okay, thank you.
And that's really true on any bond, right? We have to pledge a revenue source, right? And it's always, in any of these cases where we would be bonding for fiber, the intention is the take rates cover it, right? But we also need a backstop.
So that's true with like Utah Broadband, where they'd ask us to, if we went and put a bond for $4 million, we still have to provide that.
It's not Utah
revenue.
Broadband who would be asking us to pledge something. It's,
Us to get the
Zions
$4
Bank,
million,
right? Or
we got to go out for a bond and we're pledging sales tax.
Exactly.
Or something that way for the bond, we're pulling for that $4 million.
And we can pledge future revenues, right? The take rates, right? Revenue from that, but we also, they're going to ask for financials and what's your backup plan and everything that way. So Utopia's latest estimate was that we need about 44%. That's where the 40% came from, Councilmember Ball, take rate to meet the bond costs. And so that number is going to go up or down with each entity depending on what their costs are for installation of the fiber project. But I think that gives you a rough, about 44% is what we would need to meet costs. Utopia has also told us that any current subscribers that they have in Highland City could count towards that take rate for us, and they wouldn't count towards the bonding costs. So to kind of give us a little bit of a head start there.
Do we have current subscribers? I thought we just had.
Now I'm second. Oh, this was when we were trying to enter the
Thought we were.
franchise, the interlocal agreement.
Yeah, we have conduit in the city, and then we got into the franchise issue, and so we're not using any of it. Okay. But if we were to get that, we would quickly get in there and get customers, and any of that would count.
So that was one of the amendments to the interlocal agreement that came back to you, had that language in there, essentially. The estimated build-out cost, again, the most recent estimates from Utopia were $14 million and a 2-year time frame. Any other questions on Utopia?
And we need to update that a little bit. We're probably closer to 15.5 right now.
Million for the build-out costs? Fair enough. I think these numbers came from December, I want to say, so things change quickly.
Yeah, I wish it weren't more, but then it's just cost of materials and labor and inflation.
No, we understand. Okay. One method that thank you, Roger. One method that I've talked with some of you about, but we haven't talked in a council meeting about. One thing that we could explore doing is, rather than trying to do a citywide fiber project, just try and go and work with the underserved areas in our community. So I think kind of what you'll see in the survey and what we're hearing is there's certain pockets that are underserved, that they feel like they're very limited in their choices and aren't getting the internet options that they need. So one option we have is work with those underserved areas and do some kind of either a special service district or an assessment area where we would have to get approval from that neighborhood in question, but it's only them. We would partner with a provider and provide fiber to that area, but it's just that area who pays the cost of it. And so, it could be, most of the time what happens with those is it's an additional property tax rate on their bill that would go, so it's them paying for the cost rather than the city at large. But they would need the city to partner with them to create a special service district, essentially, to facilitate that. An HOA could do something like this as well. We're just thinking of just to target certain areas.
It would be a property tax and not a fee.
We haven't fully explored all of that, but I think that would be likely for a special service district.
Do we know what sort of interests, we're talking a lot about bonding here, any kind of what going rates on bonds are now? Because the interest rates on a lot of things are pretty high.
Well, a municipal bond, Roger's probably going to look it up. I was guessing probably 5.5% to 6% on a municipal bond. And I don't know if we're close or not, if that's what they've been going.
Okay.
That is not a question I was prepared for. And I have no Tyler here to help me.
We'll probably have some good guess here in a minute. Well, Roger, would you like to, I know you go out in that market, so maybe you know how to find that.
Last one we did was in December, and that was for West Haven City, and our true interest cost on that one came in at 4.43. I think we're probably a couple of points higher than that now, so we'd probably end up at 4.6 or 4.7 or something.
So you think we could be under 5%?
I think so. Not by much. Granted, you decide to do something today and you're not closing for 2 to 3 months, so it could certainly.
We would have
be
closed
beyond
yesterday
that.
with all the bank stuff. It was way down.
Yeah, so.
We could have bought Zions Bank.
Yeah. That's a good question, though, Scott.
Yeah, I just wondered.
So this is a different concept. Any questions on this one?
I just want to make a comment. I've had people approach me that can't get hooked into Comcast, and they were told some outrageous fee to bring it into their neighborhood. So, and they just said they'd be interested in something like this. So I know there is some interest out there.
I think there is, and I know actually at neighborhoods I've heard, Scott, have had the similar thing, and they decided to get together and eat those costs and do it. And so, sometimes providers will do it on their own, but it is a big upfront cost, which is why if you put it on a property tax, it's less burdensome, right? Because you have a longer time to pay that cost.
But like an HOA, like if you're subdivision, let's assume you didn't have Comcast where Pheasant Hollow's at, where Councilmember Smith lives. You're an HOA, it'd be easy for that HOA to come together and say, hey, let's go ahead and put it throughout our HOA. And you can even put it part of even HOA fee or things, and everyone would get the internet. I could see Bull River might be an underserved area because but if not, my neighborhood could say, okay, we're going to try to get the 62 homes, but we'd have to have a certain take rate. It would not affect, my understanding it does not affect any of the other residents in Highland. It'd only be that one specific area that would have a special service district formed to be able to do this.
That's correct, Mayor.
Have you identified the 7% that haven't received service? Do we have some idea?
We could work on that. There's a map available through the federal government of where, of internet options throughout the city, so we could work on that. Honestly, the intention would be, if we selected this kind of a model, is when we get phone calls like that, it's, hey, we have this option for you, would you like to pursue it? But we could try to promote that ourselves or try to identify those areas ourselves. This is one you also have not heard before. The mayor and I just heard this yesterday. So Centricom is actually the city's ISP, and we learned late last week that they were also interested in doing that they had a model as well that they would like to work with the city on. And so this is very preliminary information because, like I said, we met with them yesterday, and you guys haven't had a chance to hear it, but I wanted to let you know that it was something that they were interested in doing. So this would be a public-private partnership with the city partnering with Centricom to provide the fiber. Essentially where, again, we can't be exclusive with any fiber provider, but they would be, quote unquote, the city's fiber provider. And so we would work with them anytime we're opening a road, right? We would we would have them come in and run fiber, or work with them on any new developments coming in, and then work with them, okay, so any roads we're not opening, right? What is the time schedule we want to look at those? They said that they were willing, they actually came in pitching the idea of doing an entire city network, but we ended up talking about this special service district method, and they said they were actually even more interested in that because it would be, easier for them and not so long of a runway there. In this method, Centricom owns the network. It is their network. They're not asking for any city funds to do this. They own, operate, maintain the network, but then, of course, they keep all of the proceeds. There's no revenue sharing in this methodology. It's their network. They do prefer micro-trenching as their installation because it does keep costs down. We're aware of that. We do have concerns related to micro-trenching from an engineering standpoint, but that is their preferred method. Councilmember Ball.
So there's no required take rate or anything?
No, because it is them using their capital to do this. Now, this would likely be a much longer model, right? Because they don't have, well, I don't know Centricom's books, but it's them investing all of their money, no bonding, right, to do this. And we could put something into the contract we want it within such a time frame, but because they're not asking for any bonding, I think we would need to be more flexible from a timing perspective.
One of the concerns I have, they could already come to the city now. I mean, this, we haven't, they don't have to meet with us to be able to do this. This is a service provider, as well as if it be Google or any of the others, they could have come and said, hey, we'd like to start doing something. That's, would they, the question is, would they start to do something actually in the city, and could we get them partnered? And will they really cover all the underserved and get the whole city? Would it take 10 years? What's the incentive we'd have to give them to get the city covered? But this is a company, they've done the fiber in Nephi and Richfield. They've done a lot of rural areas. They're out of the San Pete area. Did they say, I think they had an office, was it in Linden? I'm trying to think. I think they have an office up here in Utah County. But I'm saying, they do the schools at this current time. So they already have the schools here in Alpine School District. Like Aaron was mentioning, the city actually has fibers from them. So, I mean, they're here in Highland. We have fiber as a city, and they probably went after a lot of the commercial users to try to put them up with fiber.
I think what would be different about this model is we would kind of partner with them and promote them as the city's partner on fiber, right, as a public-private partnership. Again, we're not preventing any other fiber company from coming in, but they would look for a stronger partnership there rather than, we're just any other fiber provider.
Can I ask Andy a question? Mm-hmm. Hey, Andy. Is all fiber the same quality?
All fiber.
Like, does it matter? Is it all the same material, I guess, no matter what you use? Does that make sense?
It does. I'm going to confess it's not that I can't answer. I'm more in what it takes to repair the streets and everything. But as far as the quality of fiber, I think that the folks in the audience are probably a better resource for that. I'm just not an expert on the
Utah
actual fiber.
Broadband, do you want to take a crack at it? We've heard from Roger. No.
There have been projects that used like multi-mode fiber and other things that are garbage. I think it's safe to say everybody proposing right now would be using fiber that's functionally equivalent. The way you do electronics with PON versus active, there's differences there, but the actual fiber cable is going to be equivalent.
What's superior from an electronic standpoint?
It's
Just in
basically,
terms of current offerings and future expandability and improvements.
yeah, the biggest difference is that if you use a pond technology, you're sharing. So it's basically like a whole neighborhood would, and the provider can decide, like, is this 16 homes, is it 32 homes, is it 64 homes? Depending on how they design it, those homes will share a connection. And then what capacity you have to that shared connection can be 2.5 gig if it's GPON, it can be 10 gig if it's XGS-PON, it can be 25 in the future, they're
But it
developing
can
that.
be limited if everyone is using at the same time. And
Absolutely.
That's similar to like 5G technology, where you're limited due to usage of like the entire neighborhood.
Yeah, so we think it's a selling point to do active. It costs more to do that, but we do a dedicated connection to every house with fiber. And then the electronics are dedicated connections, whether they're gig or 10 gig, and there's no sharing. There is an argument to be made that the provider comes in and says, well, we're not going to do GPON, we're going to do XGS-PON, and that's going to provide so much capacity that it doesn't matter that they're sharing. And that's true, depending on how much people use it. And then people use more in 3 years, and then they upgrade to the next technology, and when they upgrade and how much people are using is kind of just this.
Well, that's what I'm concerned about as we transition more and more services to a streaming type of technology, that we have to have the capacity to maybe accommodate a big factor, X factor increase in usage, and also the broadness of the,
Yeah, I mean, you don't need to convince me of that. I like an active deployment because today we could do 400 gigabits to one home on an active deployment because I can put any electronics on that fiber to that house. Whereas with a PON technology, I'm limited to what is available, and because there's only certain speeds supported by that, and you have to make assumptions about use and what's coming down the pipe. So some providers kind of take that approach and say, this is good enough for today, and someday we'll have something better, and we hope that that'll keep up with consumer demand. The other approach is active and dedicated fiber, which is essentially guaranteeing future-proof with any capacity that you could possibly have. So we get into that debate all the time, and I'm like, they both work, but definitely active in a dedicated fiber per house is more. It's a little more expensive, but it is definitely more future-proof. It's less common though, so more people do the cheap route with the PON. Questions?
The gentleman from Utah Broadband, is that the technology that you use, or what do you use?
There's different use cases for both, and we deployed both in different areas of our network, active and GPON.
What would you use here?
We would use both.
Oh, you would use both?
Yep.
Okay.
Active for businesses maybe, and for residential, that's common.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks.
Any other questions about Centricom? All right. Another one we heard about on the survey and other places is, what about Google Fiber? Can't we get them? So we have had 2 conversations over the years with Google Fiber, one most recently in January, where they said they are not currently interested in coming to Highland. So that is not an option for us at this time.
Makes it easy.
No, we're not.
So this actually reached out to Google last year, was working with their governmental entity, got all the way back to DC. They came back and said no. Then all of a sudden Google reached out to Andy, and so we started the process again, got to the very end, and they still said no. I'm just saying, it wasn't just a phone call. It was, they were looking at, they kind of did some studying, and we did not meet their criteria at this time. That can change, but at this time we don't meet. Google Fiber, if they did come, would microtrench. They're a microtrencher.
Mm-hmm. Another option, we can just let things ride as they are and let the free market manage this for us if we don't feel like this is something that Highland City itself wants to get involved in. So let the status quo continue. Non-profitable areas will likely continue to be underserved. We don't have any, well, I won't say any. People have options here, but there are places where they seem to be underserved, and that would likely continue in this status quo type, including some city facilities. While we're kind of with cell towers and other things, we're figuring out how to get internet at parks. We do see those challenges, especially at city facilities. And what this could lead to is anyone we have a franchise agreement with can do road cuts in our roads, right? So it could lead to multiple companies doing those road cuts rather than, again, even if we were to partner with somebody, other companies can still do the road cuts, but it might decrease the frequency if we do have a selected vendor we're partnering with, just because there's less motivation for the other companies to come in.
The other options, we look at free market. As we've started, we reported back to the council, we've started putting conduit on any time there's a development that has an open area, we've started putting conduit in. But if we're going to keep doing that, we need it starts to cost the city, but that conduit then could be leased to a free market provider, or if at a future date we decide to do that, you can do that. But that's what we've said, hey, if we're doing any road work or things, we'd want to put conduit in, so down in the future, they would not have to come disturb the road. But that would also be, as a council, do we want to do that to help the free market to build it, get to the underserved areas or to areas we're doing work on, or just let the free market, happen? Or if the free market happens to come in and open the road, we could hurry up and run and put conduit in it. If we work with a service provider, like if you say, hey, we want to do free market, but we want to have a preferred service provider, what that means is we would notify that service provider, we're going to be opening, or this subdivision's coming in, you have an open trenches, or this is where we're working on roads. If you want to come, you're going to, because you're our service provider of choice, you would be able to put these lines in, we're going to keep in close contact. Where if it's free market, not necessarily we're going to really communicate with them. It's really for them to follow what we're doing.
Mr. Mayor, so just to clarify, you said that anyone can come in. So we have no control over stating you cannot trench.
So at this current time, what my understanding is that Comcast and Centricom already have a franchise agreement with us, and they can already go in our roads and in our right-of-ways.
But that was just Centricom, you were being specific.
Yeah, well, there might be, is there any others that we can think of, Andy, that might?
Like a CenturyLink, of course, would. But any entity we have a franchise agreement with who follows our procedures with road cut permits, we have to let them go. And anyone who applies for a franchise agreement with us, if it's a similar ones that we have approved with others, we should approve those as well.
And we happen to have two providers that have now asked, we're familiar with Utopia, or UIA has asked, can they get an interlocal agreement, which is similar to franchise, and also Utah Broadband has also asked if it's a free market, can they also provide? Once you open that up, they can go anywhere in the city, and it would be the free market moving forward. But I'm just letting you be aware, that's how the free market works. You've opened the market up for them to then be able to go forth in that market. It's not just, you have Comcast, CenturyLink, Centricom, Utopia, Utah Broadband would then still be able to go forth and do
That
that.
sounds like a mess.
Well-
I'm just saying, and perhaps this is a question for Rob, but we grant monopolies all the time. Rocky Mountain Power has a monopoly. You can't just say, I'm going to bring in a competitive electrical power source to the city. It's a legalized monopoly, just like it is with Dominion Energy.
We did ask Rob, there was a request by Utah Broadband to be the only, they would be the only provider if we chose them to be in, and Rob has stated that we cannot do that.
Great, I'm going to bring another power company in.
Well, and to be very open with you, some cities do have to. Like, when I was over in Colorado, I had to try to find out which power company had the last power to my building, and but in some cities, Lehigh has their own power. Now, traditionally, you're not going to overcross each other. If we choose a service provider, so let's assume we choose a fiber service provider, and they go throughout the city, most likely, there's not going to be someone else coming in because there's a preferred service provider that already has lines there, unless there's something more competitive they can add. The costs are similar. We're hearing the cost for Utah Broadband or the cost for Utopia are somewhat similar, or from Strata. We're not seeing the cost. So it
It
wouldn't be.
would be a heightened risk for them to come
Yeah,
in if
it's-
there was already
if
an
everyone's-
established provider.
Yes, but that's why if we go free market, it'd be better for us to put conduit in and lease it so they don't disturb. You could have 2 or 3 that want to run fiber down our conduit. That's the free market. That is what we have to decide. Do you want to try to close in you want free market, or do you want to choose a provider? Now, I think we want to get to the survey because it might help us understand, what we're kind of heading into, what our residents have thought.
And with that, we'll head into the survey results. So you guys are queued up really well tonight. Thank you. Okay, so this is a survey that Strata actually offered to do for us and ran for us. And they've sent me all of the data, and they analyzed the results for us. So I do appreciate them managing this for us. They were trying to fit a lot of information onto, just a handful of slides to not make this too long, but it made the text kind of hard to read. So I've printed them out for you because even as I go through this, I know you're not going to be able to read everything. So I'll do my best to summarize for you. Okay, and again, they send their apologies. They had some conflicts tonight and could not be here. So as a reminder, we did this last part of February, first part of March. And you had to be a resident to take the survey. You had to provide your address in that regard. And we did remove a couple of duplicates. There really were not many, but a couple of duplicates where it was the same person, same address. And so we were trying to answer 3 main questions with the questions we asked. So what's the current need and availability of internet in the city? Would residents, are they interested in in a fiber network? And then are they supportive of the city bonding to do so? And actually, Councilmember Bills asked me if I could send this presentation, and I just emailed it to all of you. So you also have this electronically. Okay, so responses. So this was all online because we needed a quick turnaround. We did not do a physical survey as well. We did get 1,090 responses, which is actually about average what we get for our normal resident survey. It's a really good response rate, especially for 2 weeks. So most of them were residents. 25 of them came from businesses. And so let's see, looking at our population data and the sample size, it gives us a 2.7% margin of error, which is really good. So essentially, you can say that the results that we have here are 2.7% plus or minus the population at large. Again, just means good sample size for what we got. Okay, so some of these I'm going to go through quickly. The average age of participants was actually a bit older than I thought it would end up being. It was a little over 50 years old. We thought this would skew towards a younger group, but we did see some within middle range taking as well.
Golden age.
Okay, so first question. What is available in Highland right now? Okay, so 2 questions. How are you using the internet, right? So we asked questions about, do you use the internet to work from home and to do school from home? 81% of the respondents say that they work at least part-time from home. So that was really high, especially actually 45 said they work full-time from home. We do have a lot of home-based businesses when you look at our business licensing, and I think this is reflective of that. We have a lot of people who are working out of their home. And 73% use their internet to do at least some schooling from home. Does somebody have a question? I heard a mic rustle.
It was me, I bumped it.
You were good.
Okay.
Okay, who are you using? And I alluded to this earlier, but 76% of our respondents said that they are using Comcast as their internet provider. The next highest was CenturyLink. It looks like about 10-ish%, and then smatterings from there for other providers. Why did they choose that internet provider? Highest was the speed, as far as the primary reason. The next highest was that's their only available option. So it was fast, or it was their only choice, and then there's a variety of other answers, but those are the 2 standout ones. Okay, this is a satisfaction question. So how satisfied are you with your internet? And so, shoot, I don't have my cheat sheet. Sorry, doing some quick math here.
5% were satisfied or very satisfied, with 22% being neutral.
I don't think it's 95%. I think
No.
it's,
No, 22% were neutral. So I think with those who are not satisfied is about 17.5%.
oh, you're right. I'm sorry. 17%, you're right, Mayor. 17% were dissatisfied with their internet as far as speed goes. So we asked 4 different satisfaction questions. This one's about speed. So 17% said they were not satisfied with their speed. And then if you look at, the next one is reliability. Is similar in that about 17% were unsatisfied with the reliability of their internet. Okay. We did ask a question, basically, do you have fiber? And only about 10% said that they do have that. The remainder have a different option. And these were, people answering the questions themselves, so that was the response we got. Okay, so 2 other satisfaction questions we asked. The first one about price. And that's where you start to see some more dissatisfaction. And what it roughly breaks down to is about a third of people are satisfied with their price, a third of people are neutral, and a third are dissatisfied with the price that they pay for internet. And then we asked, okay, so how much do you pay for internet and what's your speed? When you look at, if you look at over $60 a month, 64% are paying more than $60 a month just for internet. So we excluded people who had bundled services through Comcast, like if they also had TV or voice or something like that, we excluded them from this question. So this is just internet. How much are you paying for that? And then we asked, what's your download speeds? Really, most users, if you're download speeds. If you're above 50, you're in a good place. And so really, it does seem like a majority, 54% have less than 250 megs, but almost everyone who reported, I should say, had more than 25 megs. Again, every home is different in how much they need, but in talking with Strata about these numbers, they felt that they were pretty good. Obviously some users need more, but satisfactory, which we saw earlier, right? They were satisfied with the speed that they are provided. Okay, I'm gonna skip that. Okay, and then we asked, what are you paying for bundled costs? And they're paying more, certainly, which is not unexpected there. Okay. For next question we wanted to focus on, okay, so are you interested in switching? If you had a fiber option, would you switch? We asked this question based on if it was X dollars per month. And so we went from $70 to $100 per month to see, again, what price would price point change that? If you remember this question, it was a sliding scale where it went from definitely not to definitely no to definitely yes. So the higher it is to the right, the more definitely yes it is, right? Definitely yes, I would switch. And so really we found that our price point break is $80 per month, at least according to this survey. So at $70 or $80 a month, a majority of people said that they were likely to switch, that they were supportive, that they would switch to a fiber. But if you get up into the $90 range, that number drops below half when you look at like a 7 or above. Okay, the next thing we tried to focus on is, all right, is this city, are residents supportive of the city bonding to get this project done? We tried to give a lot of information in here so that residents could make an informed decision. Maybe we gave too much and it was too much and they didn't read it and they just answered the question. But we gave a preface of, here's we're almost paid off of our bonds. You know, it would require us to bond, and we would have to backstop those bonds if we didn't get the take rates needed. Do you want the city to bond? 67% of our residents were supportive of the city issuing a bond, so they were either very supportive or somewhat supportive. If you remember, we asked a similar question, though not nearly as detailed, on our resident survey last year, and the answer was 53% at that point. Again, this was an electronic-only survey, so I think you're hitting a different demographic, and you're not touching a demographic you do with our resident survey. But we do see, it seems like somewhere between the 50, well, probably 55 to 65 range of residents do support the city bonding, is what I feel like we can take from this for this project, for a fiber project.
I think you have to remember, this is an internet survey.
Correct.
Done by people that use the internet all the time. And so there's a lot of people that don't use the internet all the time who may have a difference of opinion, and I don't think we've sampled them.
Well, I think that's where last year's survey
Yeah.
from the city, where it dropped to 53, you know, now I'll be very, we actually had another gentleman come in that has been a consultant for several internet companies. And when he said, he goes, oh, you go survey, you're gonna get 85% of the people that do it. He goes, that doesn't mean they're gonna sign up and do it. He goes, but they'll all say 85% will say yes. And so I expected that the survey is gonna tell yes. Now when we say, will you pull your wallet out, and now will you sign up for the internet and get off of Comcast or get off your other provider, that's the thing. I've had a lot of business ideas, pitched, and they said, okay, I'm willing to do it. Now will you get your checkbook out? Well, no. Well, you just said yes. You love my concept and idea. It's kind of like,
I mean, if we're planning on bonding for several $1 million, I think it would have to go to a public vote.
is that something that we can?
Well, they don't have to, but I think we ought to.
Certain types of
Yeah.
bonds require a public vote, so it would depend on how we wanted to bond.
Right.
And you're absolutely right, Councilmember Smith. We expected this to be higher than our resident survey, but just because you are hitting a different demographic there.
Our paper survey last year, which had very similar, which would have, we had paper and we have internet, which our city, it was not as detailed in the, this is only geared at fiber. It came back at 53%. Now, we didn't have the wording on, hey, we're almost out of debt, or things that way.
Oh, I think this is a nice survey. It's just that it's hit a certain demographic of people that use their internet.
So, okay. But this is what this survey came out.
Excuse me. We also allowed residents kind of just a free space for comments. And I'm not going to read all of these tonight, but Strata tried to kind of provide a summary of the types of comments we get, or types of comments they saw repeated over and over again. People were interested in this idea, wanted to make sure that the price was good. But the opposition centered around, to your point, Councilmember Smith, going into debt, and the city, are you really going to be able to backstop those bonds? Maybe the city, this isn't the role of the city. We got some questions about that. We don't, the city doesn't know enough. And then kind of some questions we went over earlier about 5G. And then they kind of tried to pick out some supportive comments where, this internet's like a utility, you need to do this. People always ask me when I build homes, what's the fiber options? I don't have any other options. This would be a good thing. And then we certainly got some unsupportive comments, and we saw this on our Facebook page as well. This should be a private thing, not a city-run thing. We've got a lot of inflation going on. Shouldn't be a project we take on now. Needs to be, private sector again, and don't want to encumber city funds for it, were the themes of the comments they received. And so with that, any other questions on the survey results? Okay, I'm wrapping up my portion and going to leave it to council to debate from here. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions, depending on your answers. Again, not asking you to select a fiber provider tonight, but asking what is your, when looking at, are you interested in doing a fiber project? And if so, kind of what are the criteria you want to do? So the first and biggest question for you tonight, council, is do you think fiber is important enough? Do you want the city to bond to ensure that we have a citywide fiber network where every home has a fiber option?
There's the question. So I've done a little calculations. This is just, if the cost was, and I'm just going to use, because we've had different numbers, but let's assume it's the 15.5 million at 5% over a 30-year bond, the monthly payment would be $83,207. If we assume that 40% has to go towards that, if it was an open network system, then that would be, we'd have to have 46%. If we said, okay, we have, how many homes, we have to have 2,080 homes signing up to cover that cost,
What would the subscription rate be?
about 46 to 50%.
But, I mean, how much would we be
It'd
charging?
It'd be $40 to go towards, if you want to say that provider, or, whatever the model. We're all assuming 40, the reason why I say 40 is we've heard from those who have open source, it's about $40 needs to go for the building, and then another $40 to open source providers that are out there, anywhere between 30, I guess, $35 to $55. So I'm just saying, if you look at.
So I would be paying like $80 a month for
80
fiber?
to 80, do you get to decide? You probably could be between 80 and 90, depending on your service speed and things of that nature. Kim, out of curiosity, how much is your family paying? What type of speed do you get?
Oh, what did Lance say?
$35 and you get 1 gig.
Yeah, thank you, Kurt.
I'm just saying, what would we get your family to come off that plan?
I mean, I'm cheap. I'll probably stay on that plan.
But I'm just.
But I mean, as technology grows and as we start using more services, we'll probably have to eventually up our services.
And so the question comes back, so that, I figure that we have to, per every $1 million that is bonded, we have to have 134 homes that would connect. And that's for a 30-year bond. We're going out on 30 years. That's kind of now supposedly, the reason why I keep saying the connectors, we're hoping that we're going to have enough users pay for that bond to be able to come in. Now, a couple of things I heard from the survey, 86% of our residents are saying the speed's okay. That makes sense. They're either neutral or they're okay with the speed. That we had, of the price, we need to be at least $80 or under, else our price of electricity, we drop. Meaning that we're not going to we have to so there's a price component we've got to try to hit if you do this. And if you start to go up or higher, you might not get those to come off. Now, we have the one concern I also did here is 34% were bundling. So that means they're getting some other service from Comcast. Do we get those bundlers to come off, or do they stay? I'm just, if I was looking at it as a business site, I'm going, okay, what do I have to do to get the 34%? Those are not just internet users. They also have TV. Now, I reckon.
Some of them have phone.
Yeah, they might have phone on it. They might have, so some have that aspect.
Wait, so Kurt, what did you say again? It was a 30-year bond?
Yeah.
So then after 30 years, bonds paid off, who's receiving the revenue?
Well, off of if you go with Strata owns it, I believe.
No, so it depends on the model, right?
It depends on the model.
Where if you select a revenue sharing model, then it would be a perpetual revenue source for the city. So after we pay off the bonds,
Okay.
we just get to keep that money.
Utopia keeps it after 30 years. I think Strata, we went and we're the ones pulling the bond.
So we would get to keep that
You
revenue.
keep you're paying. And then on Utah Broadband, depending.
Revenue sharing.
It's a revenue share. If we pay 25% of the cost to build, we get 25% of that. I assume we get 25%.
Long term.
Yeah. I assume, now we haven't went out the RFP, we haven't got back the formal bids, but that would be an assumption.
So Utah Broadband, there was like a 75-25, was it?
Or whatever cost.
Yeah, and
we
so
could-
after that bond's up, then we'd get 25%.
Well, we get 25% even while the bond is being paid. We're getting
Yeah.
25% of the revenue that's being generated. At least that's my understanding.
And from that kind of a model, right, you get less revenue sharing, but you're also bonding for less than like a strata model.
Then Utopia, we don't bond at all, but there's a take rate we have to do, you're pledging. What was the one that was Centricom? Once again, they'll come in, but they're gonna probably look at areas that are gonna be easier to go into to get a little higher take rate, because it's total for profit. The one thing we have to look at, if we don't do anything, here's and I don't know how it's gonna go, but we're gonna start being the only city that they might even be able to wanna come into, because you've got, Lehigh's done something, American Fork's doing something, Cedar Hills, Pleasant Grove, Linden, Orem, Provo, Springville, Spanish
Alpine.
Fork. Huh?
Did Alpine sign this?
Alpine has not, but I'm going, after a bit, if you're gonna be an internet provider and wanna expand, we have to look, you don't have unless you wanna go over city lines, you don't have a lot of areas to expand. That's a business decision. Is that, as a city, does that attract others to come in? Because we're we're an open source. I mean, we're open market. Go ahead and come in. We'll try to help you with conduit going in that you can run, but we're gonna let the free market take it. However, it will be a slow process. It's not gonna be something where, hey, we know in 2 years or 3 years that every home's been, we're probably in 10 years still have some homes not taken care of.
I guess I'm kind of looking at this as an investment. I mean, because if we do something where the city can make revenue after a certain amount of time, after we pay off the bond, and it's a perpetual revenue source for the city, I guess that's my feeling of it.
But in 30 years, do you have to dig it up and put new in?
I know.
I have a question for the two providers that are here. Is $80 realistic, or are residents going to be unhappy with what they get for $80? I just remember fiber coming in before I lived in Highland, and I thought the price was astronomical for a service that I actually would want. So is $80 realistic?
We'll let Utah Broadband go ahead and,
Yeah, so that price point, I mean, you guys have hit the nail on the head, right? So between $70 and $85 is really the sweet spot, from what we see. Roger may have a different opinion.
Yeah, so right now, most of our projects are priced at $60 for the entry level at 250 meg, and it's $70 per gig. This one's $10 more, but we have the majority of our signups are not going for the $60. They're going for the $70 because they want the gig, and not even the $70 gig. Our most popular provider is the $80 gig, and so that is well within what even presented with different price tiers and service provider options. Our most popular is people picking an $80 gigabit service. On our proposal of, you guys have this cost and service providers have these costs of whatever for the city, that's in our price range. I mean, that's where we're expecting to land, and you'd get take rate.
And is that $80, does that cover the provider as well as?
Yeah, that's the
users?
all-in.
That's the whole package?
is $80, is Highland going to be $10 more than that? Or are you saying it was 70 and Highland's going to be $10 more, so it's going to be 80?
So right now, our gigabit offerings at a $30 infrastructure fee, and which is most common for us, are at $70, $80. In Highland, we would expect those to be $80 and $90. You are a higher cost city, the lots are bigger and spread
So
apart.
you think it's going to be 80 to 90?
Yeah, so the way we have everything structured right now, you would have gigabit available at $80 from some providers and $90 from some providers. That's your range, because we don't set the retail price.
So that, it sounds like both of you, because you've mentioned also 85. Now, here's one question, since we have both of you. What cities do you have that have over 45% take rate that you've done? That really, truly have a 45% take rate? Or higher?
For complete citywide build-out with those take rates, Brigham City, Perry, what percent did you say?
45.
I think we're right there in Layton, kind of on that
So
threshold.
how long's Brigham City had internet, or the fiber?
Oh, they've had it for like 10 years.
Okay.
I didn't get to Linden. Linden's been up, they're like at 60%. Morgan City is at like 68%.
But those are 10 years in. I mean, I mean, to be very open.
Morgan City's like 4 years in, and they're at like 68, I think. We have some that are really high. It's really, I mean, I wish I could say this works everywhere.
I don't,
It's highly dependent on competition and demographics.
So that's with Morgan, did they have 93% of Comcast already there, or they're a much more rural area?
Have Comcast,
So that's what I'm saying,
that helps.
they didn't have another service at all.
So what I would say is don't trust, like, the surveys are great, but don't trust it for take rate. Take rate, we would say, is going to be based on what we have in Linden because it looks just like Highland. It looks just like Pleasant Grove. In some ways, you're better. And so that's a better indicator of what you're going to get from a take rate and revenue perspective than any survey will give you. And Linden is one of it's our second highest take rate. Orem right next to there, we just finished, so we don't have the history there, but it's 40% trending upward past, we expect to
So
get 50%
Linden, you've been
there.
there for 10-plus years, right? When did you finally hit the 45% take rate in Linden?
I mean, it was 10 years ago. I mean, we've been there for 15 years or so. I mean, and that was even pre-COVID, right? Like, things are very different today. So the timing of Linden, I don't think indicates what we would see here, but the eventual take rate, I mean, you'd match them, it would just take you 5 years to get there. We really want to get to the needed take rate within 3 years, because that's what we propose as a capitalized interest period for your bonding. And so you want to make sure you get the take rate when you need it, even though we know we would exceed it, if that makes sense.
Okay, council, thank you. We'll come back to the question. As a city, are we interested in going out for a bond for fiber?
I think where I'm sitting is the lower bond. One, I think interest rates are a little bit, I wouldn't say they're high, but they're crawling. I think we need to mitigate the risk to the city and the time and the possibility of paying off that bond early. And I like the idea of having a revenue source and making it a new investment. I don't like the idea of having a bond for the full amount. I think that's a pretty big risk.
So what I'm hearing, sir, you're okay, there was a proposal, and we're not necessarily choosing, because we would go out to an RFP and say, hey, this is something we're looking at. You're saying, hey, go out, let's assume it's a 20, if the build job was 16 million, and we're saying we're going to go for a bond for 4 million, for 25% of that. You're saying you would favor looking towards a bond to go out for that, understanding that take rate would still need to be that 45 to 50% to be able to help pay even that $4 million back.
Yes, but I did write down that I would like an RFP from Strata, Utah Broadband, and Utopia, because I do want to make sure that I have the information of what the investment would be, what we're getting out of it. I also am interested in the financial stability of these companies, because if one of these companies go out of business, that's a problem for us. So I want to know what their financial stability is. And a question for Utopia I had is, what happens when no more cities are signing up? And so this is an interlocal entity, and so I might need to be educated a little bit. What happens when no more cities sign up? Is that business model still viable? And two, I'm uncomfortable paying other cities. If we're going to do that, I would rather just do it with Strata and take out the bond and then have more revenue. Like, if we're going to take the risk, let's have the revenue from it as well, unless I'm misunderstanding.
So Utopia actually has two models. In fact, Bountiful City right now is discussing doing their own bond to own their own network with Utopia as their contractor to run and operate it and build it. Okay, so that is on the table. If you want to own it and bond for it and pay for it, that's easier for us, to be honest. We then are your contractor for your project.
You'd just be like just the same as the Strata model is what they're saying.
Yeah. That's not a preferred model. We think we're doing you a lot of favor by issuing the debt, by holding the public hearings, by addressing the debt, and sharing the cost structure across our economy of scale. As a customer to us, we don't. We price you, give you a price for the project, and you pay that price no matter what. In the UIA-owned model, you benefit from whatever cost structure. Like we say, we're not going to charge you any different from any other city that's part of all of the UIA projects. So you'll likely have a lower cost structure under a UIA partnership because you are us. Does that make sense? As a client to us, as a vendor selling a service to you, we just negotiate a rate. If you want to put into that structure a revenue model and say, hey, we're going to charge a higher rate, you can do that. I mean, we're the only ones who've actually done this, to be honest. No one else has actually done it. So we've done it in Woodland Hills. They own their network, and they charge a different fee, and we charge whatever they want to charge. We've done it in Idaho Falls. We've done it in Bozeman, Montana. And now we're doing it in Bountiful. And so that's available to you. But if you want to mirror the model and pricing of the other Utopia projects that are not those cities, then that's the UIA partnership model. So we're happy to do either.
Okay, and tell me a little bit about, I don't know if you can tonight, but about the financial strength and stability of Utopia.
Maybe we can get, because we're, all of the providers, we can probably get financials.
That's true, and maybe we should just do that as part of the RFP. That's a good, I'll table that question, because I think that belongs more in the RFP.
Very good financially at UIA. So I'll just set a thumbs up without detail.
So, and I'll be, I think most of the providers we brought in and talked with, I've been impressed that, they seem to have knowledge, and they seem to have some financial backing. They've kind of lasted through, they've either bought out others and kind of merged, and we're seeing some maturity of the market, and so most of the providers are a little more mature in the market. But good questions there, Sarah. So Sarah, $4 million, you're looking, going out for a RFP or an RFI, and saying, hey, we're more interested in trying to do a bond at $4 million. What would be your proposal with that and cost?
Correct.
Is there
then what
other
would be-
input from other council
yeah,
members?
And what would be our revenue share on that?
I have a question for Aaron. Aaron, what would be the circumstances under which we would put this on the ballot as a bond versus making a decision? I mean, since it's an election year anyway, and we're already paying for an election this year?
Can we get it on the election for this year?
Of course. It's
Yes,
early.
there's a deadline. Oh, Stephanie, do you know, you just went to a training on this. What are our deadlines?
What can we do as an election?
Isn't the deadline in
I really
August?
wish I had that information tucked away in my brain right now, but I don't. I believe, I would have to look that up before I could give you an answer with any confidence.
But do you know what type
apologize.
of revenue we need to go? If we want to have the residents vote on this, what type of bond was it we would be looking at doing to have the residents?
Okay, it's been a while since I've had my bond class, and I work for Highland, which doesn't bond. So my recollection is general obligation bonds require us to go to vote, right? So where we're talking property tax. Other types of bonds, Roger, you probably know more about bonding than I do.
Are you allowed to, even if you're not required to?
It's so this kind of comes up with a number of issues, but getting on an election ballot, it has to be, you can't just put any question on the election ballot. It has to be like a referendum, an initiative, an election, or certain types of bonds. Like there has to be something in state code that says you can go on the ballot. We can't just ask any question we want.
So we actually pushed legislation and got it put into code that you could ask an opinion question about doing a fiber broadband project on a ballot. And that was great, except that Comcast, a bunch of others lobbied to put a bunch of language in there that said, if you do this, you have to put it in these words, which says, do you support that the city issue this debt and including all the cost of the bond and interest payments and, I mean, nobody considers their mortgage for their house of $400,000 to be more than $400,000. And, obviously you pay interest over that and you're like, well, your mortgage for your house is actually going to be $800,000 in payments over 30 years, right? But they have tweaked the language so that when you put this on a ballot for your residents, the language is specifically structured in opposition to the project and becomes a huge problem.
So the
and
bond
then you're
would say-
also silenced.
Are you willing to authorize a $30 million bond for Highland to do fiber internet? Because it'd have all the interest built in and everything's what you're saying. So that's,
So is it bad to be truthful with the citizens?
oh, no, I'm just saying that's,
I mean, I don't understand. See, I have a little problem. Okay, we'll go
No,
ahead.
but-
Go ahead, yeah.
The problem is it's not even a neutral statement. The wording you're forced to use is anti-bond.
Because it tells everything.
Because no one would ever describe a bond the way that you will be required to describe it. And once it's on the ballot, the city is no longer allowed to comment or mention anything, and you'll have active campaigns against it. from incumbents and
But
everybody
to be very
else.
truthful, I think when you go pull a mortgage, I think they actually have a mortgage statement that tells you what the life
Exactly.
of a mortgage would be. I mean, that just, I mean, just truthfully, that's kind of.
And we've always when we have pro and con things, we always are able to send out our side of the
Yeah,
city
but
card.
it's just, your hands are tied. Like, the moment you decide to go that route, it is not a fair discussion with your public. It is, the language was told to you by Comcast of how you are going to message this to your residents.
Have
So-
any other cities put it as a question?
Nope. Once that language was put in, everybody said, this is so terrible, we would never even bother. The council, you're authorized to enter into a revenue bond. You're not allowed to do an general obligation bond without a vote, but you can do a revenue bond just on the vote of a council. So councils would just say, it's in our hands, we've been voted to
One
do
of the things
this.
that is, it brought up that we're unique in Highland, we're almost out of debt. Let's be very, we're, 2027, we're coming and we're going to be out of debt. A lot of other cities do go out and bond. It's not been the way that Highland has went about it. Does that mean and so we have to be careful that our residents, I think that's where Scott's kind of saying, hey, traditionally, doesn't mean but traditionally we've not done bonding. Now, however, that means that if you look at our park, Mountain Ridge Park, if they would have pulled a bond 10 years ago, it would have been done. Is it better that now we're paying cash? So, that bond would still be going on. Does that make sense? The park would be open, the bond would be going on.
Yeah, but we haven't had to pay interest for years,
Correct.
and we found the money to build this park
But that's-
without doing that.
And so that we have to be careful with our residents that, they are a little more conservative. I mean, we've had some referendums on roads before. Now, we're going back, 8, 9 years ago, but they were even worried about the roads, and they did a road referendum and turned down the road fee at the time. I'm just going, our residents traditionally are a little more conservative in their nature. Not saying if we can, we can go about doing the bond. That's one thing we have to be aware. Some of our residents are going to say, but I thought you said that you were close to being out of debt. Is it something, that's just questions we're going to have from residents. Because I've always heard Highland's been very cautious about bonding.
And certainly, we're not deciding tonight, yes, we're bonding, or like I've said, yes, we're selecting any of the providers. It's staff, if you want us to go out and, create a
RFP.
request for proposal, what are the parameters that the council is potentially interested in doing something, in doing a fiber project under?
Erin, sorry, I think I've asked you this before, and maybe I don't remember. If we decided to bond that way, is that referable or no?
Yes, bonds are referable. So the special revenue bond, or excuse me, the revenue bond that Roger mentioned, it is referable. Meaning you could end up on the ballot that way.
No, they have to go collect signatures.
Go through the normal referendum, the new referendum signature collection process.
Okay, council, we've had, Sarah's kind of chimed in. Is there others that would like to give some input on this question? Are you interested in the city bonding for fiber internet?
Well, and I could be supportive of not bonding as well, so.
Right,
So,
it's a hard thing.
But
because
I'm not supportive of bonding
The entire
15
amount.
mil. No.
I guess I'm just interested in bonding if looking over the financials and a very long-term perspective, it could be an investment for Highland as another revenue source. I mean, just taking a business stance. Is this something that is a good investment? Is this something that is wanted and needed by our residents? Like, what are we going to get back from it? I'm not interested in bonding and not receiving anything back for it revenue-wise. I'm not interested in that model.
See, I'm worried about the take rate. We hear they have the speeds fast enough for them.
Yeah.
I'm looking, from a business thing, would you go out there and is this worth the business? Because you've heard from our residents, they're not struggling on the speed. You know what I mean? Cost is, they'd love to be able to get that. We're going to find out that that's negotiable, meaning that, hey, I used to be at $60 a month for 800 download from Comcast. However, they started throttling because I had a gamer in my house, and we had to pay an extra $90 to get it unthrottled, or an extra $30, so we're now at $90 a month. And that seems to be, I'm unthrottled, I'm not having anything, but that's what I had. It appears you have to negotiate with your service providers, and that would be with everything. my concern is, would we get there with the high percentage of people with Comcast, and they're not saying they're dissatisfied? However, do I think that some would change because they hear it's fiber? Does it make, is that, we saw in the comments, hey, if I'm selling a home, I'd love to tell them it's fiber internet. Yeah, it's a catchphrase. In reality, I've used the cities on fiber, and I've used it at home. I can't tell any difference. Does that make sense? I don't seem to be loading down faster here at the city than I do at my house. And so I have Comcast at the house, and the city has fiber, because I've been trying to say, I want to use fiber. I don't know about fiber. We talked about, now you're going to, and I don't mean to be negative on another community, but there's another community in Utah County that has a fiber provider. And those people in that city are all excited to hear that Comcast is coming in, because that fiber provider has been a poor service provider for them, and they've had somewhat of poor service, or in certain areas have, and they want to have competition there to have their service better. You know, and so it's hard. Which do we want to try to do?
So can I ask another question of the two representatives here? If we left it for just open access.
Free market.
Free market, how would you approach our city?
I'm going to tell you they've already applied, but they can come answer. Utopia is already trying to go into Ridgeview. They've already asked for an interlocal agreement because they want to be in Ridgeview and hurry up and get the conduit. And we have Utah Broadband wanting to go up where Perry Homes is at, up by Beacon Hills. They've also requested to be up there because they want to be in Perry Homes. But those are easy, what we call greenfields. Those are brand new homes going in. The dirt's just being turned. It's being cut. They want to get in there. The cost is a lot less expensive to get in. It's once you get in the
That's what
old
I'm wondering, if they would
So if you guys
be
like to answer
motivated at all
that,
to.
if we keep it free, open, Roger, I'd really be interested in this answer. You're open to go anywhere in Highland? Are we going to be able to get you guys? It's a great business model. You're going to make a lot of money. You've already said this is a good city.
There's no good money in residential unless it's open trench. So you're going to struggle to get any provider to build fiber to residential areas in what's considered brownfield. They'll do a little bit here and there and grow where it makes sense, but you'll never, not for a very long time, will you have 100% coverage of fiber in your city without some sort of partnership or incentive. You disagree?
You guys can move your chairs closer unless you want the stats that you're getting, so.
Sit right here.
I'm sorry, remind me your first name.
John.
John, okay, thank you, John. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, I mean, the answer is ditto, right? Like, it's very cost prohibitive to do this. But on the other side of the coin, I mean, this Utah Broadband is pledging, 75% of the cost to do this project. So I think we're willing to put some skin in the game, but we just need something back from the city as well.
So I guess what would happen if we said, hey, we're going to put some conduit when we're doing our road projects? We're putting conduit down the side of the roads, or when we're doing some, we might be doing water work. Does that entice you to get to certain areas because you have an easier access or things that way?
I mean, certainly it helps, but, speed is important, right?
I'm sorry, what is?
Speed is important, and just in terms of deploying the network. And if you have, 4 or 5 road projects and you're kind of in different areas that don't really touch or connect, it's nice, but not really attractive, right?
Okay. Thank you.
And I'd say in a lot of cases, we turn down even when conduit's made available. I mean, Lehigh had conduit available to us back in the day, and it was kind of a hodgepodge here and there, and we didn't really have a base of operations in Lehigh. We've been interested in in Highland, because we are 100% building Pleasant Grove and Cedar Hills, so we have a lot of land, to us, it's just an extension of what we're already building. So it made sense for us to do some of the open trench and expansion in the city, but that's not always a given that a city that has conduit. I mean, Lehigh City, it took them a long time to get anything in place that actually made use of conduit, partly because they didn't really know what they were doing with the conduit. They didn't keep track of it, and they were like, it's out there somewhere, but we don't know where it is and don't know if it works.
From a business standpoint, one thing we have to look, if Ridgeview's putting 689 homes in, they haven't chose their internet provider yet. Now, however, I think some of those are HOAs, and maybe has that HOAs already chose who they're going with out there, though, because you have David Weekley, Boyer, Lennar and Ivory, have they kind of already chosen who they're trying to go with, over in the Ridgeview area?
My understanding is they're not entered into bulk agreements. They're kind of like, well, we want to facilitate the providers putting in conduit, but we're not going to push our residents into bulk agreements. That's different when they put in condos or apartments. They'll do bulk agreements. But they're kind of we'll just facilitate and we'll let the providers know when the trench is open, you come in and put your own stuff, and it's up to the providers to go get agreements. HOAs can enter into bulk agreements, but they can't enter into exclusive agreements. So there are some times when people will be obligated to buy some service, and it would take them buying an additional service to get a third-party option, but they can't actually be prohibited from coming in, except in Traverse Mountain, where I live.
I'm sorry, where?
Except in Traverse Mountain. They have an exclusive easement up there, which violates federal law, but that's a long, until someone sues them, they have it. So, but in most cases, it's just kind of fair, open market. Developers just make it available to any provider who wants to put their stuff in.
Okay, thank you. Council, we'll go back to this question. I mean, so Kim, you kind of mentioned you'd be interested in looking at doing a bond for the fiber. Sarah, are you still kind of? Okay.
Yes, yeah, I'm interested for the lower amount, not the, like I said, I'm not supportive for the 15 mil at all.
Okay, I'll answer my question. I've been here because this is, a lot of times for the decisions I make in the council, it's kind of easy for me to see white and black. I see a lot of kind of pros and cons on both sides of the issue. So I'll tell you, my gut thing on bonding, I have a really hard time bonding the city. When I came on the council in 2010, the first time, we had $18 million of bonded debt. And over the years, we're down to about $5 million, and I'm really kind of angry that I agreed to an agreement where we couldn't pay off the bond early because we had to have our bonds paid off right now. And somehow I feel like I was duped on that. Somehow I missed that. I don't think you saw it either, did you? So, I think when we refinanced the last time to save a little interest, we got kind of, so I'm a little worried about it. I can see the advantages of having a citywide fiber system. I can see the opinion of Kim in that it might provide some long-term revenue for the city. We've got about 4 or 5 different models here in front of us. But I have a really hard time voting for any bonding and just saying, okay, the council can do it, and we don't care what the citizens think in some ways, which kind of bothers me because that was the attitude that was kind of in the city before I was elected the first time, and there was a lot of kind of pent-up frustration with that. I think it's the kind way to say. I personally think before we did that we need to let people have a say on whether they want to put the city in more debt. Now, I think everybody would like this high-speed fiber if we didn't have to pay for it, because that's the American way. We like stuff that we don't pay for. But at the same time, I think there's some advantages to own it. So right now, I kind of could support Sarah's opinion on a lower bond, but I don't want to do any bonding unless the citizens have some kind of direct say in it, because I've been part of the push to get us out of debt, and we're so close. And now we're talking about going into debt somewhere between $5 and $18 million more. It makes me really anxious. So that's where I'm at. So I'm going to say no.
So you're saying no, do not do a bond?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess, but when you talk about without having, our residents have a say on it, that's why you put it on the ballot, and they can vote on whether they want to pull out that bond or not.
But we were just told that we shouldn't do that because Comcast put this awful language in to defeat it. And so, I don't know what to think about that, but I could support it more if the citizens could say yay or nay on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there are people in this city that are very adamant about us going into more debt when we're almost debt-free, because
Yeah.
I think of course, there's always economic uncertainty, but I think where there's especially a lot right now with the tremendous debt that the federal government's in, and it may all kind of collapse, because we see things change dramatically, like last week. All your regional banks all of a sudden were in big trouble. I mean, what's going to happen tomorrow? It's hard to predict the future. So I'm a little nervous about putting the city in a lot of debt without the citizens saying, yeah, we're all for high-speed fiber and we want to pay for it. Yeah.
Didn't Lehigh put it on their ballot, or no, when they took out that bond? I swear they did.
American Fork did their fire station as a bond.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, does anyone know if American Fork also, when they did, they haven't pulled up, so American Fork has not pulled their bond yet on internet. I don't know if Lehigh, do any of you two know if Lehigh put it out on a? They not do it at a ballot thing. Okay.
So some of these cities have a different philosophy about bonding. Last time I looked, American Fork had like $58 million of bonds. Lehigh had like 78 million. Of course, they've got better resources than we do to pay them off, but I think there's different philosophies about bonding and borrowing as a city.
I mean, there is, so I mean, I guess we're going to say is the city bonding. We're assuming, and I guess I just need to ask, are you assuming, because there is one proposal out there where the city does not go and issue a bond, being Utopia, but we still have to back the bond? Does that make sense? And so are we talking both as, when we're saying bonding, are we lumping Utopia in, or is that a separate conversation we need to have?
It's the same thing
Okay, that's,
to
I just want to
me.
make sure.
Yeah.
Because it's an obligation, so you feel it's the same when we're asking for city bonding, it's a bonding of either, that's what I said, of any supplier.
Well, in some of these models, we own the network in the end, and others we don't. I mean, it's like 4 different options here, I think.
And like I said, we'll put an RFP out to all that have been interested. I think you'll be surprised. I think we've already heard from the 2 here that they would probably, probably on any of the options we put out there, they'd probably show some interest. I don't know if we're saying the $4 million, that, hey, it's 15 million or 16 million to do, we'll pay 4 or 25%. I don't know if every provider will do that. We know we have one that presented that as a concept, so.
And as part of that RFP, I would be interested in customer service results.
Okay, we've got a couple other council members that we probably need to hear from. And it does matter, as you can tell, it's going to be a close one.
I like the ideal upside, where we participate in profitability, we have a revenue stream, but I'm going to have to agree with Dr. Smith in that we don't know what's going to happen with the economy. What's so funny?
I was looking at Brittany and to say that's coming down to her, so.
I have to agree with Dr. Smith. I don't know the direction of the federal government. It's kind of scary what's happening. And so there can't be an idealized upside because we just can't predict what's going to happen. And I think in the best interest of our neighbors and friends and the citizens of Highland, we have to err on the side of being conservative with revenue. And so I might be open to a smaller bond, such as Sarah mentioned, but I just think it would be irresponsible as we're nearing a debt-free status to go back into debt for $18 million. So it's a tough situation, and I'd be much more comfortable knowing what the real numbers are and being able to compare those numbers as opposed to just speaking in a conceptual, theoretical sense at this point.
So Tim, or Councilmember Ball, would you be supportive of an RFP essentially that said the city's interested in partnering with somebody to do where we front a portion of the cost but not the entire, just to get the information back so you could make the decision? Or are you saying, I don't even want to offer that?
No, I would be interested in
Okay.
that. Because we really can't make an informed, intelligent, responsible decision without hard numbers. Everything sounds good, but I mean, unless we see the numbers, we really can't make that type of decision responsibly.
I tend-
Mayor and council, oh, sorry, Brittany, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Just so that you're aware, August 24th is the last day that you can put a bond on the ballot. Okay.
I tend to agree with Dr. Smith as well, that I don't feel comfortable bonding unless we know it's something the residents really want to do. It seems crazy to me that it's not a thing you can put on the ballot, because in Utah, can't you just have 2 voters put an initiative on the ballot? So I don't understand why a city council can't put something on a ballot if 2 registered voters can. So I would be interested in exploring that more.
I'm not sure 2 registered voters can put, I think the initiative, they got to go collect
They
signatures.
can collect signatures and then,
And obviously, I was wrong. I did not know about the item Roger brought up. I did not know you could just put an opinion and question on the ballot about fiber. And so maybe, I'm very willing to be wrong. We told Rob he didn't need to be here tonight. We didn't think we needed legal, and I'm sorry for that now. But, so that's something we could explore with legal.
so I would be interested in exploring if there's a way to put it on the ballot. I don't see the harm in going out for an RFP and really understanding the implications of one of those smaller bonds, I would say. But you know, when you talk about a revenue source, I mean, we're not really in the business of generating revenue. We're in the business of just providing basic services. Is there anything that we make a revenue, like, we don't make money on anything, do we?
We
Fire
do on
wildland.
Yep, fire and ambulance. Ambulance is
No,
also
but
a
it's-
revenue
Or
generating.
trees, Arbor
It
Day
certainly
South.
seems like the
Or that, if
responsible.
it's the trees.
It
Yeah.
certainly seems like a responsible thing to do if we can do it in a conservative manner that protects our citizens and their tax funds. If we can do that and create revenue, then why shouldn't we be in the revenue business?
That's what I think, because I think we've all seen inflation hit the city, and we're going to be faced with raising property taxes if we don't come up with other ideas
And
to
this seems
cover
to,
expenses.
and this seems to be an inflationary and risk-resistant industry where people would be very reluctant to give up broadband. I think, I mean, it's not like health insurance, but it's pretty close probably the way people are tied to this type of service, so.
Yeah,
So
and I'm
here-
not sure, I have Comcast right now, I answered the survey, I'm moderately satisfied, I don't sit there and complain every day. Their customer service is terrible, I complain about it every time I have to talk to someone. I prefer not to talk to anyone from Comcast, but as far as speeds, but if the price was right, I would definitely switch to fiber in a heartbeat.
And
I
don't-
have zero loyalty to Comcast.
Yeah, me too. But I think we also have to be responsible stewards in the sense that this technology will be necessary eventually.
Agree.
And
Yeah.
then Comcast is throttled by, excuse me if I'm saying this incorrectly, but by a copper, would you call it a trunk? Or would you call it infrastructure? What would you call it?
It's a wire technology.
Well, I'm just talking about the infrastructure itself. Shared copper infrastructure. Right, eventually that's going to hit a limit. Right, and so I think eventually as responsible stewards, we need to push for this, but we need to do it in a responsible way. But I do have a quick question. In your experience, both gentlemen and lady, in your experience, a bundled service, a typical bundled service with basic cable and some extras, and phone and internet, the price going through one of these models, how does that compare to Comcast?
It was pretty tricky in the past to come in with a bundle that was competitive with Comcast simply because they had the content and others didn't. That's gone now. So basically there's 2 leading cable replacements that do really, really well, and one of them is YouTube TV. I think they're about $55 to $60 or so now. It's gone up a little bit over time. It's a very solid product and competes really well with Comcast. And then if you're a Jazz fan, you want to watch Utah Jazz games and there's some regional sports, then people will pick Fubo TV. And between those 2 options, plus the cost of a fiber, you're at a lower cost and better video option than the bundle from Comcast.
And then, of course, you have available streaming services such as Netflix and
Yeah, those aren't really like replacements for Comcast, like most Comcast customers still buy those
Those are
in
additions
addition.
too, in addition to.
Yeah, so those exist no matter what, whether you have Comcast or something else, people still sign up for Disney Plus and
So with
Netflix and those
YouTube
things.
TV, you would have broadcast.
Yes, the local channels and the news channels and the sports and all that stuff. They're a straight drop in, cut the
And
cable at
what's
Comcast.
the resolution that's available with a service such as that?
It depends.
I'm not sure if resolution is the right term, but
The quality of the picture, I mean, is
yes.
that?
Like, is it
yeah.
4K or is it what is it?
It's some content, most content is 1080p. Some of the sports networks are still at 720. And then there's some, usually it's movies where they're pushing 4K as opposed to broadcast.
Is that similar to Comcast then?
Yes, yeah, very similar to Comcast.
Okay.
It's a comparable experience to Comcast.
So it's not going to be like sticker shock, where someone's comparing apples to apples. They're paying way too much, like I am right now because I have someone that lives at my home and they watch TV all day, so I want to give them good selection.
Yeah, it's trended in our favor in the sense that the Comcast bundles have gotten more and more bloated, where you get
Because I pay
300 channels. and-
$200 and something a month, and I still come across, I can't even get that channel. So,
Yeah, so broadband versus broadband, we win with the cable plus broadband versus cable plus or Fubo or whatever with broadband on Utopia or even these other options you're considering. It's even more compelling with the bundle comparison, the apples to apples with video.
great. Thank you, I appreciate that.
And I do agree with Tim and Kim that, I mean, one thing I think the survey makes very clear is that while people are happy now, they still want to bond for this. So I think it is looking towards the future a lot, right? We're happy with what we have now. I didn't say, I'm very consistent with that.
So can I summarize what I think I have heard from council to this point? What I've heard is you are interested in us looking into see, is there a way to get an opinion question about this on the ballot somehow? Number two would be, we are open to doing an RFP of some sort, not for the full bond amount, but some kind of a cost sharing with a provider. So those are the kind of the two directions at this point that I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm interested, I am going to answer yes, I am interested in this. I just want to say one last thing. I don't view bonding as altogether bad. If we had bonded for Mountain Ridge, we would have been in a better situation. We would have saved a lot more money by bonding for Mountain Ridge. So there's good things to having debt. Debt is good at times because debt saves you money. And there's bad things to having debt. It's just all about if you do it the right way. And it's hard because there are risks to it, and there are, you can't tell the future, but at the same time, you can save money by having debt.
Can you elaborate on that? I've
Yeah.
never understood how I save money when I borrow it.
Well, actually, okay.
Because I always have to pay it
Okay.
back with
Let's walk through.
interest.
So
Yeah.
Mountain Ridge Park, if we would have done it in 1990, or was it 2019, we had a bid for $5.4 million to get Mountain Ridge. Now, it did not have the playground. It was not as elaborate as what we have, but now we're ending up being almost $9 million with COVID to be able to get it done. You know what I mean? After all the inflation. Now, with that, what should be interesting is what's kind of raised some of the cost. We've gotten a lot of ARPA money. So here we're at 5.4. I think we've almost gotten $3 million in ARPA. So now you're at 8.4. And so really that ARPA money's kind of boosted up. Now, here's something interesting for the city. One of the reasons we're able to do Mountain Ridge at this time is we're having a lot of park impact fees come in because of Ridgeview or because of some other development, which we did not have in 2019.
That's right.
And so that's kind of what's juiced a little bit to be able to do the cash. And so it's, now however you look at this building, they bonded for the, I believe,
Yeah.
Aaron, they bonded for this building, correct? And so we have this building. You need to be aware when this has happened, there were some residents in Highland that were not excited about the city bonding for the building. They felt it was a little overkill. Here we are, we've had a beautiful building, but we've had to pay a bond to be able to, to have this building, but we got the building because of a bond.
But I mean, if we had saved up cash for it, how much would it be to build this building versus taking out a bond and paying interest? You know
If you
what
had
I'm
the
saying?
cash at the time, you don't pull the bond, that's fine.
Well,
Yeah.
but again, it's kind of apples and oranges. You have to figure out how much interest we paid over the last
Yes.
15, 20 years, because it's easy to say, oh, that wasn't a lot of money, but it was. And so,
So that's, for instance, if fiber in 30 years still costs $30 million to put in for the city, it's the same cost, because if we do it at 15.5, if it's higher than it was, but if it's lower, let's assume they have, some people have come in and said they're worried about technology changing, or that there might be other methods to be able to get internet to the residents, and we're taking a 30-year approach. That, I mean, that's, when we're talking about doing some of that, you're taking a 30-year bond. This is, 30 years ago, I don't think there's a lot of fiber around. Now, is fiber going to be the technology in 30 years, or is Starlink gotten up there, or what's some of the other providers that have come in to be able to provide and fill that gap? That's where we've heard, when we had residents coming in, that's what they were saying. Hey, be careful, you're doing something for 30 years, and it might change on you. Now, for me, in 30 years, this would probably be fully depreciated out, and we'd have to probably look at doing something in 30 years. Is it fiber still there? Do we have to replace the fiber, or with the other technology? It's a hard one. So hold it, let's kind of go back. Okay, I want to make sure we do understand. So what we've heard from Kim is, I'd like to go for an RFP. I'm okay doing the bonding, but I'd like to get an RFP. I'm also okay if we can get a question on the ballot, correct? Okay, Tim, are you in the same thing, or you said earlier you're not in favor of bonding? I just want to make sure that,
I am, but like I mentioned, I'm more in favor of the smaller amount. I'm sorry, what?
okay, if there's something,
I'm in favor of the smaller amount, kind of a hybrid approach. I agree with Scott in that we need to be very conservative in what we do and not encumber the city, especially going into an uncertain future. But Kim has got a good point too, and you guard against inflationary pressures by doing the project now, but you have
or
to.
are we already at the top of the inflation? So that's my
But-
question.
right, but you have to
Do we already have
temper
the
that.
inflation and it's going to come down? We don't know. That's the question.
Yeah,
we don't know.
Yeah, if anyone has the crystal ball, let me know. But that's why I think we have to be conservative. So I agree with Scott. I actually agree with
Okay.
kind of a
So what's your
hybrid approach of
recommendation? Are you
everyone.
recommending you supporting a bond to go and do an RFP and to have it on the question of the ballot?
But yes, but we need solid numbers in order to make an informed and responsible decision.
What is it you're needing from them solid numbers?
I want to be able to see, for example, if we pay 25% instead of 15%, what the revenue increase would be, and over time, what's the future value of that money? And a lot of different questions that I have that we really, right now, it's everything's conceptualized. It's theoretical. We need to see numbers in order to make a responsible and informed decision.
Yeah, and I agree. I don't want to make a decision until we have a financial forecast.
And I can see in this case, comparing apples to apples is going to be very difficult. But what I think we do agree on is, I think so, is that if we're responsible, we're going to get this technology. We need this technology because Comcast is going to create a bottleneck eventually for all the new technologies and all the new adoptions of different technologies in our homes.
Okay. So you're okay pulling a bond, doing a smaller bond? Because at first you said you would support Scott. You're now saying you're...
Well, Scott did say he might be in favor of a smaller bond. I believe he said that. But I think he says we need to be very cautious in how we proceed, and I agree with that also. But the only way to be cautious is to have the numbers.
So Scott,
And
what
we-
is it, where are you at on this?
I don't know, I'm the old guy here, and, I've borrowed a fair amount of money during my life, and it's burnt me every time, including the last 3 or 4 days, so I have a little sour thing. So,
What's he talking about?
I wouldn't be totally opposed to a small bond if people have the chance to give their opinion and say they do it, but the smallest possible. But, the question is I think you have to be careful back between needs and wants. Do we really need fiber, or we just want it? And so, but that's kind of the decision you always have to make in life. So, I've been restoring my grandparents' home, so I want a lot of things there. Did I need to do that? No, but I wanted to do it. So, but it's come back to burn me. So, I have a little sour taste over the last few days. So, if we bond, it's got to be real small, and I still might vote against it. It depends on what patient interest. I'd like to have this city out of debt. I've worked on the council for 13 years, hoping we could get out of debt. We're almost there, and now we're not. So, I don't know.
Hey, Brittany.
What's up? Yeah, I agree with Councilmember Smith. I would need to feel like very confident that this is what the residents want and that they're comfortable with going into more debt. I would, yeah.
And Sarah, are you still of the opinion that you're okay with a smaller bond?
I am, but I agree with everything that's been said as well. I'm very supportive of finding out what the residents want, and if the residents say no, I'm very supportive of that. So I think that's important to understand what the residents want. That's who we're representing. So I think that's good points, and I think we do have to be careful about debt. I'm not one for debt, and so that's why I would consider it, but I want the revenue share. But I also like the idea of putting the city in a situation where we can have some revenue that is not coming from taxes.
But is that, okay, here's my question on the revenue. And is that what the city's supposed to be doing? Like he says, that the service, if we're supposed to be a revenue-generating city, and I understand, then we should go out there and go and encumber a lot of other type, because we can control development, and we should go buy ground and develop the ground. I'm just saying, where is the responsibility of the city in, you know, because Kim asked me a question, Kurt, would you go, is this a business deal? And I'm going, here's my issue. I don't know my final revenue, so if I'm going to go pull a loan, I really don't know if I have a 45% take rate or 50% take rate. When I do a lease, if I buy a property, I know I have a 10-year lease that's from a national company that's worth billions of dollars. Right now, this is, and I'm just going to be very, we're using taxpayers' dollars to speculate a little bit here of what our take rate is going to be. It sounds a little bit like a business. Is that the risk? Now, we've had to go do sewer. You know, where the city had to go put sewer out there. That was a service that, you know, me and Scott probably remember that a lot of the city was on septic, but the city went out there and they said, hey, any other new development now has to be on sewer. If you're on septic, it can stay. We still have some residents on septic, and they come on and not, but there's some that, you're going to have one proposal where we did not take the sewer line down a major road. The city's going to have to incur that cost to take the city sewer down there, because now they want to come onto the city sewer. That's the question with the water department. The water department, but are we supposed to make money on our sewer? So on our sewer, do we charge a little extra to make sure we have a profit? Or are we supposed to cover our overhead? That's the question for these are taxpayers' dollars. Some taxpayers would say, I'd love that you generate revenue, that you can pay for other things out of that revenue. That's a question that I think is a personal question.
Well,
I think that's a great point.
I think we have to think about that, because we'll be a build-out, and we won't have any more revenue from, let's say, building permits. And you mentioned, I think I heard someone say speculative. It's not like we're opening up a Bitcoin exchange and at high speculation. It's a service that is almost to the point of being considered a necessity by modern society. So I think we're minimizing and mitigating
Is fiber a necessity, or is internet a necessity?
Internet's a necessity. However, the way that things are trending in terms of technology, we're throttled by copper, and this is going to sound like a sales pitch, sorry, and liberated by fiber. You know, I'm going to come work for you. I think it opens up a door to all kinds of technologies that we aren't going to be able to get in the near future from Comcast. And they're going to keep saying, oh, we'll improve our electronics. It's just like you've got a 2-inch main pipe for plumbing. It's only going to hold so much water. Sure. So you've got to upgrade to a better technology. And this will take us, this probably, I think the limitation is what, 400 as opposed to, right, but that's only limited by the electronics, correct? Not by the medium. So,
okay, so Aaron, let's come back to your question in front of you. Do you feel like you know this answer to the question? Are you interested in the city bonding? So okay, I'm going to tell you what I've heard, because I always get confused, because sometimes we get down the road and go, well, this is what I heard. All of us hear something different. So I'm going to repeat back what I've heard, and if it's not true, please correct me. I've heard Scott say no to bonding. Now, he's a little open to it, but really, he's against it. He wants the city to get out of debt. Am I thinking correctly?
I think that's right. Can I throw something in real quick? So, Aaron, aren't most of our bonds with Zions?
Yes, our
Zions just went out of business. They're on a watch list with Moody's as of today. So I think we have to take that into things. So if whoever we're bonded with is in financial trouble, that's a little worrisome to me, because they might call those bonds all of a sudden to shore up their finance. So there's lots of uncertainty. Okay, Mayor, sorry.
Okay, and I'm not, the bonding, I don't know, I think Zions is just the, if you want to say the putting together and then they
intermediary.
sell it out to the market. Okay, I've heard, I think, I'm just going to, so from Councilmember Brittany Bills, I've heard that she is not in favor of bonding. Yeah, but if the residents, I think Scott, but if the residents said yay, they would be okay, but they are saying no to bonding, that they really, that's not the revenue that they want to go after. They're not after bonding. Councilmember Sarah Peterson, she goes, I'm okay with a small bond. I want to make sure there's a revenue. I want to make sure there's financials. I'd like to have residents kind of buy in, but I'm okay with bonding. Is that correct, Sarah? So I have, at this time, I have two that say no to bonding, and one that says yes. I have Councilmember Kim Radella. She sees that this is a good business prospect. She sees there's a revenue. She sees this is something for the future, and she is in favor of bonding. She sees that this could be good for the city in the future. Is that correct?
Yes, but I would want to put it on the ballot so residents can basically
Okay.
be able to have a say in it.
Okay? Now, to be honest with you, Tim, this is, I've heard you say, no, I'm going to support Dr. Smith. I'm not really, I think I'm not in favor of the bonding, but I've also heard you say, I can see the business aspect behind going and getting a bond. And so I can see the bond, but I've also heard you say, I'm not really in favor of the bond. So can you clarify where you're at?
No. And I'll tell you why. We can't, I don't think it's possible to make a decision. We can make a generalization, but not a definitive outcome without numbers. But I would say I probably leaning toward more Sarah and Kim, where I am in favor of it, as long as the numbers and the data support it.
Well, that's why I think it says, are you interested? It's not saying, will you bond? I think if you're interested in it, then let's explore
answer is
more
yes.
to make sure that the cost-benefit analysis is there.
Then the answer is an obvious yes from me,
Okay.
because we can do a cost-benefit analysis.
Now, does that help you? I'm just saying sometimes there's soft conversations, and that's what I'm saying. I was confused. Sorry, Tim, I was a little confused on that conversation.
No,
'cause
I
I'd
can
heard
see
one-
why you would be.
And
Yeah,
so,
so I'm in favor of it, but as Kim pointed out, are you interested? I'm interested. I don't know which way I would vote until I see the numbers, but I am interested.
I don't think there's a reason not to do an RFP, but I also think, Aaron, when we're all saying that we want to know what the residents think, like, we have to decide for us what that looks like, because we said that last time, so we did a survey, and now we're saying,
We don't like the survey.
right, so I think that that's not necessarily fair direction for you also, and I understand that, which is why I would like to see the option of
Putting it on the
something on the
ballot.
ballot, because otherwise
fair.
that's not
what
fair,
I just
Gail.
heard you say is, we've already done the survey. We found out, it's coming back 53, it's coming back 65, but
Yep.
we really want to know, are you okay if we go pull this bond? So, okay,
Okay, so we are moving forward with a proposal to see, revenue cost. So again, the city not taking on the full bond amount, just a portion of it, but also exploring how can we get that question on the ballot to see if residents are in favor of that. Okay, the first question applies now, given you're first. So does it matter to you if the city directly bonds, again, for the smaller amount, or would you want the city to bond through an interlocal entity? So interlocal would mean it's not on the Highland City's books directly, but it could potentially mean higher costs and less control for the city. Every model was different, right? And honestly, this is a model partially we haven't fully contemplated. And there could also be some diffused risk if it was not on our books directly. We still have to pay it. To Brittany's point, it's kind of the same. It just who houses it is different, but.
is it sitting on our books? Do we have it in our audit as a liability?
Our current bonds?
No, if we do the interlocal entity where they go pull the bond, is that risk on our books because we have had to back it? Is it in our audits? I think it has to be somewhere in the audit.
It would probably show up like as a long-term liability. I mean, it wouldn't be on our books like that it's us that's taken out the debt, but it would show up, I would say, probably as a long-term liability on our audit.
So does it change anyone's opinion if it's a bond that the city pulls versus trying to work with an interlocal agency that's not necessarily us going out and doing a bond?
Are the interest rates the same?
I would assume they're going to be very
I have no
competitive.
idea. Yes,
I
according,
have an opinion about this. I think the city should directly bond. I think it's more transparent. I think we keep track of it, and I think we keep control of it.
So is that saying yes to what Sarah just said? Okay, anyone else?
I hate to say this, but trending toward Sarah on this issue. However, the numbers will need to come to bear.
And, and I agree. All of this is dependent on what we see on the
Most of what we're
financials,
saying now
for
is
sure.
all supposition
So
and conjecture.
going
Yep.
forward, we all are on the agreement, subject to the numbers.
So what you're saying is you want to do a bond, you would rather have the city pull a bond. What we're really asking, city pull a bond versus interlocal entity. Is it the city pull a bond? You said yes, Sarah said yes. Tim, are you a yes on that? It's the city pulling the bond, not an
but what,
interlocal.
the more specific we can get in our RFP, the more apples to apples we can get from responses. So I don't want to say, give us both options, right?
Correct.
To our vendors. So I really want us to be able to say, we want a bond or we want to do some kind of interlocal.
So one thing that's a little similar is when we entered the agreement with the Provo River water users when they piped the canal. And it's been kind of interesting for me to see down the road how things have kind of changed, because in our last audit, all of a sudden we had a big liability sitting there that I bet none of us, when we voted for that, would realize that big liability would be there 12 years ago. So that's kind of, if you bond through an interlocal entity, and you know, and I know I sound kind of negative all the time about utopia, and I apologize, but at the same time, you know, 12 years from now, are we going to have a big liability sitting there? You know, but I said don't bond, so I'm not going to answer this question. Yeah.
So Tim, are you more of a direct bond than more than an interlocal bond? And the interlocal means we're not the one pulling the bond. The city's not the one pulling the bond.
I'm more in favor of the city, and I hate to sound like a broken record, which is ironic since that's an old technology, but I hate to sound like a broken record, but it almost seems like this is difficult to respond to without the numbers, to pick either one. And so, but just on the surface, I would say, I would agree with Sarah.
Okay, Sarah or Brittany, is there anything you'd like to add here? Or, okay, so I think you've got three that are saying city pull bond. What else do you need, Aaron?
Nothing on that. The second.
Doesn't that answer the second question? Yeah.
Well, the whole point of we're only going to pay 25% or so of the cost of the project, I think answers that question, because no entity is going to say, oh, and you own it, even though you only paid 25%.
We'd own
So-
20, kind of.
So what we have heard from the council, I haven't heard anyone say we want to pull 15.5 or
No.
$20 million bond. I believe everyone I've heard was saying, if we do a bond, we're looking to do a shared in there where if it be 15, 20, 25%, lower amount, where we get some revenue and then we also have a revenue at the end. Am I speaking correct? That's what I think I've heard, correct? Is that right for you, Kim? Sure. I don't want to put words in your mouth that's not correct.
I guess it's hard because it's hard to make decisions like this if you don't have those real numbers in front of you of, you know, what's 50% versus 25% versus 50% kind of thing, and what's a subscription, what does that mean for revenue sources? That's the hardest part about
What
it.
you're saying is you want to know if we're saying we only want to be a 25% owner, what that full cost is. I mean,
What's it gonna cost
I'm going
us
to be
in
very
revenue?
open. If we hear that we can go to someone for all the way for 15 million, and yet we see a partner come in at 20 million and they want us to pay 25%, we know that's a heightened revenue, that's a heightened model that we're really, that we're kind of, and I guess the question for me, if you could really put the 25%, are we putting our 25% in first, or, is it really matching as it goes out? Does that make sense? Are we the seed money for the business of the internet, or? Yeah, but I'm just, that's what I'm saying. That would be my, if you really go that way, we're participating as that cost goes. We're not given the 4 million at one time. However, the problem is your bond, you take it one time. But you're paying interest on it. But you can,
Right.
Okay,
interest does not go to bed.
we're making progress. Would you want to see a revenue sharing option for the city? It means more risk for the city because, of course, companies would want us to put skin in the game in order to be willing to do a revenue sharing option. But again, it does have the potential for a long-term revenue source for the city.
So haven't we answered this?
I
by
think that's a
saying-
yes. Okay,
Because if you directly bond, you want to share the revenue to help pay that bond.
Pay the bond and
But it
also
would be
benefit
at the
them.
lower price. I mean, again,
Right.
we're not interested in the 15 million and then, gosh.
I think I know this answer, but I just want to clear it up. So there is an option to do a utility-type model, which means everyone pays, not just subscribers, but everyone pays a small amount, and then, of course, subscribers pay more. I think the answer is no, we don't want to do that.
You are correct.
I could use a swear word there, but
Wait, I am in agreement with Scott.
I am as well.
okay. I want it to be noticed that Scott, or that Kim
Well-
and Sarah have said that they're in agreement with Scott.
I can finally answer and give you a definitive response, and that is, I agree with Scott.
So Brittany, where are you at on that? You in
Once in a
agreement?
while it
I mean, I
happens.
kind of want to disagree just for fun, but no, I agree with Scott.
Okay.
Okay, guess what? We get to skip this whole page because you already said yes to bonding. So skipping that, or a potential to explore the idea of bonding. I shouldn't say said yes to bonding. Okay. Do you want a proposal where it's an open source network, or do you want it to be sole source? Open source, again, would likely mean more risk for the city, or because, okay, let's just be honest, the Utah broadband model is kind of what we're talking about from a share, like we're only putting in a portion, but they are a sole source. And so I don't even know if that's an option for them.
Yeah, that's the question.
You know, and we'll see what they say on that from a formal proposal. So
But we don't know.
we don't even know if an open source only shared
I would be a
is
little
an
careful.
option because we haven't had that proposal.
Here's your thing. We have to be a little careful. You do say only sole source. We could say we'd like to have a model where it's sole source, and then we also want to see the open source because it will keep the competition in if you keep open source. I'm just saying, if you do it, you can narrow it down to where you only have one provider, where if you go, okay, and I don't know if there's a benefit to be more open source or not. I'm not, that's something I haven't, you know,
From a
one is really.
you know, the argument would be consumer choice, right? Then they have choices. I mean, it's all the same infrastructure that they're using, but they're choosing different carriers.
But do we have to decide that now, or can we just say, bring us whatever you think would work
Well, I'd
best
have them
within our
do bids both. Can
parameters?
you give us a bid for
Yeah.
open source?
Yeah.
And one for in your RFP, also one is open access. You know, can you provide both, or do you only provide one of these options?
I think honestly, that's one we could leave open for right now.
Because it sounded to me like we couldn't prohibit anyone from coming in, nor do I want to prohibit others from coming in.
No, this is, open source means like, okay, just to use Utopia, for instance. Utopia, you have a $40 that maybe goes to Utopia, and the other 40 is your service provider, or your 35. You're going to choose, you know.
Whatever, so that's open
Yeah,
source.
your blue, that's open source. You're going to choose amongst the 8 other carriers that might have TV, might not, you know, they might have different services that you could bring in, but they have that's open source. Am I saying that correct,
Got it.
Roger?
We call it open access.
Open access.
Same thing, you understand what it is. Choice of providers competing on it, a single provider, or what you're calling closed sole source, would be available. Utah broadband, I don't think you're proposing an open model. So,
Not this
doing
time.
the smaller bond, you've already put yourself into, there's only.
Sole source.
Okay.
A lot of these things are contingent on.
Oh, so
the
that
other.
is good. No, so because you're only going to do a $4 million bond, our only option to go out in the bid would be a sole source.
No.
And that has helped answer that question.
There you go. Okay, next question. The city has incurred some costs, so actually, this came from a conversation with Utopia, and we appreciate them offering this. They indicated, hey, we're not going to put any more conduit in right now until we know the direction the city wants to go and if they're going to approve our interlocal. And so they actually said, if you want to put in conduit, you know, here's some information we have about that. And so we have been doing that, to the mayor's point, thinking that, okay, maybe a provider would want to buy that from us in the future if we did go forward with somebody. But that is a cost to the city right now that we do not have budgeted, that we do not have a revenue source for at this point.
So are we doing this, though?
We are, right now. We've put it in two that I'm aware of, 2 or 3.
I feel like we need to know, what does it cost and what is the
Fair.
opportunity? I think for me, it's a blind question. I have no idea how much conduit costs. I have no idea how much we could lease it for. I have no idea what the effort is. So
To me, I
can't
would,
answer that.
I would default yes, because I think we know that the cost is so much less now than it is later.
This is only when trenches are
When
open.
trench is already
At
open.
first, when we very first heard it, we heard the trenches on Ridgeview were like 3,500. We're going, yeah, get it in, because once they close, it's much harder. However, the question then came up exactly what you were saying, Sarah. Hold on, what is the cost and what is the marketability of it later on? You know, and that's something, I think if you go with a sole source, naturally, we'd be looking to say, hey, we'll either sell it or lease that conduit or something that way, or we can keep it and let them kind of be open. The question is, we can't, just so you're aware, on any internet provider we have, there still will be other providers in Highland, just because we've
Sure.
already opened it up for other providers. And so,
But competition can be good.
correct. But just be aware, when the city, there also that competition can compete against the city. Meaning if we put in, you know, they can kind of compete. So, okay, anything?
We'll look into this more, but yes, okay. Okay, so at this point, based on your feedback, staff will prepare some kind of RFP type document asking for formal proposals from providers. Again, looking at some kind of a cost sharing, but they would own the network, and we would ask for a revenue share back. And so getting their proposals so that we can move forward, and also looking into the option of how can we potentially put this on the ballot, the question about bonding. And that's everything. That's the show, folks.
Okay, so should we have the mayor summarize as well, so we all...
Please,
It
if I
doesn't
missed
hurt.
anything, please.
No, I think you've done a good job, but I'm just thinking, just make sure we're all on the same page, what we understand, because you've done a pretty good job.
No, and I think what Aaron,
Yeah.
what we'll be doing is we'll be going out for now an RFI or an RFP, very specific, saying we would like to have we're willing to share in a certain portion of, we want to be, in a sense, partners.
We will directly bond for a portion.
Yeah, we will directly bond for a certain portion, or we'll give you funds for a certain portion of the internet.
Where would we
or the
get
fund.
those funds?
But we would like to get, but where we would like to
Sure.
have revenue source come back towards that. And then with that, that kind of gives a signal to our residents, because we've bonded, that really in that bond, it's really to go hit all of Highland, correct? I mean, we want to try to get it to all of our residents, and they need to probably give us a time period that they would state that they could get to our residents.
So can we put in there that we want to have ownership of the network, and also that we want to have a say in subscription prices?
I think we
So-
could ask them about, you know, what would your proposal be for, in regards to those? Ownership, I think, is going to be tricky, but when we're asking them to pay 75%, you know.
I mean, if
give or
they're,
take.
or whatever percentage, if we're paying 25%, then we have 25% ownership.
Okay, so you're making that more specific.
Shaking his head no.
'Cause if-
Could you elaborate?
Yeah, that's one thing we have to understand. If we do a minor thing, you're the minor partner there. The question I think we'd have to have is what, can you guarantee a certain pricing, and also with the increases, can you put in there what the maximum it can increase? Because one of the things we got to be careful, when we talk about, hey, in 10 years, well, our fiber might cost in 10 years, even if we did a city, at a higher rate. I mean, when we started this proposal in 2020, right before COVID, I think we were at $70. We're now already at 80 to 85, and yeah, that's been because of that, but that's some of those costs that have come up too. And the operation costs go up. That's what's hard is, we'll just have to see. That's the unknown. That's the, I will tell you, when we did pressurized irrigation, we've had some residents come in. When they did pressurized irrigation, they pulled that, and I think we're just getting ready, we just paid it off. We were told there wasn't going to be an extra cost, that we would be at what, at $25 a month. Well, my bill is not $25 a month for PI. I'm just saying, there's been other costs associated with it. Right, correct, Scott? I mean, that's why some have been mad, is going, hey, we heard you weren't going to meter. We heard you weren't going to increase some cost, that you pulled this bond. We have to be careful on the message we put out there that, hey, this isn't going up, we're going to be guaranteed all this and that. We don't know the future, and unfortunately, costs go up.
Well, the problem is life is risk, life is uncertainty. We try to make the best decision we can, and I think we base it on different opinions and things. So you can't say 100%. We'd love to, but we can't.
Okay. Anything else? Aaron, is that helping you get specific enough, or do you, Scott, do we need to, have I explained it? Do you understand?
I think you explained the majority of the council.
And of course, as we've talked about, this isn't the final decision on anything, so this will give us direction to prepare that document to get some bids back or some proposals back that then council would evaluate at that point and decide whether or not to move forward with any of them.
Roger, I see that you'd like to ask a question.
I want to make a suggestion, and you can throw me out if you want. I've seen success in some cities, and some of these have gone our way and some have not gone our way, of cities appointing a committee, broadband committee, where they can meet, and often they'll have a representative from the city council on the committee, but also invite technology experts or broadband experts in the community, and then they sit down and they write the RFP and they invite the companies in and meet and grill them and all that sort of stuff, and then they come back to the council with a recommendation, because they can have lots and lots and lots of meetings and discussions in the period of a couple, what may be 1 or 2 city council meetings. This is a difficult thing to move quickly from a council perspective. So I've just seen that work well in other cities, if that's something you want to think about.
That's probably a good suggestion. Is there?
Well, I like it because, I feel like we have residents in our city who actually understand this. It's
I can pull in
asking,
their expertise.
yeah.
And there's several people to talk with them. Is there a council member or 1 or 2 that feel like they would like to, it's going to take some time. And there's been some we have visited with. We've had some residents, to be very open, about 2 years ago or 3 years ago, we had some residents that showed up that had been in this industry, but there's some that have been that we could ask if they could help. But be aware, the main pressure will be upon the council to make sure that you're getting the input to be able to help answer those questions. Is there 2 council members that'd like to offer to be on that?
I nominate Tim Ball.
Tim, would you have, okay, I'm going to be very open. Most of them will be during the day. Tim, do you have time during the day to meet?
During the day is difficult for me.
You can, we can see it in the evening, but I'm just saying, if not, it will also be evening.
I have to do evening, but I'm willing to do evening.
It just depends on the supplier, because they're doing it for a job, and so you're asking them to, now we have some come in the evening anyway. I'd like to have 2 council people at least on that, just to kind of help, because this is a pretty big decision for the city.
I'm willing to do it.
I can pop in the meetings, I'm happy to participate. We need to get some residents probably that are specialized in this to make sure we know what we're doing. Is it, so Tim, are you saying more of the evening? Yes. Is there another, I can join, is there another council person that wants to be, or just gonna be me and Tim?
I would love to do it, but I'm overextended.
Okay, it's me and Tim, we're gonna go for it. I've got some people, we gotta get some residents to kind of go, okay.
From a priority perspective, just to give you kind of scope, honestly, we will move forward on this, but when we're looking at budget and Mountain Ridge Park, and I have a new person starting on Monday and a few things in that regard, this will happen, but it's going to take us some time to get this ready. So I don't think I think now we at least have a direction, and I don't want this to die forever and like we did a couple years ago and not bring it back, but I don't think this is not going to be my top priority.
Can we set a time frame on this of when we want to bring it back so that we
okay, we're heading into budget. Does that make sense? It's just, when
Yep.
you start talking a lot of time, we have also some city open houses. We got Lone Peak budget, and then we also have city budget. But I mean, I'd love to say, realistically, probably the end of June, if we could get by the end of May, but I mean, that's really probably just with the timing, and why don't we
Right,
shoot towards the
I
end of
just
May?
think it's best to
At least have a goal and a.
goal and
I
say,
think that's
hey,
Shoot
we
towards the end
will.
of May, it just depends if we can get the time and everyone can meet,
Okay.
so. And it might be we bring back to the council and say, hey, as we start meeting as a committee, this is the concern with the direction we were kind of going with this, is the shared and how that worked. So, okay. Anything else here?
No, sir.
Okay, I appreciate this taking a lot of time. We've had a lot of presentations. I think it'd be, good. One thing I want to just remind those who are on Little Peak Public Safety, we have a meeting tomorrow morning, and we start our budget. So we have Lone Peak Public Safety in the morning with the budget on that, and that will be at 7:30 a.m.
See you all in 10 hours then.
So with that, I guess we didn't really start with, we can have a motion to go ahead and conclude our work session.
Motion to conclude.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Kim, second by Scott. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for those who have participated.